as well as the racial awareness subgroup that is affiliated with the cultural intelligence community.
Hi there, I'm Bill Lingle. I am a Perrysburg teacher at Toth Elementary. I teach first grade for the last 18 years. I'm also a part of the CQ community within our district, part of the racial subgroup as well. I'm also in the community of Perrysburg. There's a coalition that is a similar type of thing that I'm a part of as well in the city of Perrysburg.
And hi, I'm Nicole Percival. I'm also a first grade teacher at Frank in Perrysburg. I've been teaching 18 years, and I work with the CQ group and have my master's in theory and foundations, which is some of the social justice issues in education.
All right, so just kind of to briefly say that, you know, several years ago we started this work in the Perrysburg district, just wanting to make sure that we were working on the diversity and inclusion, and, you know, this work is so important, so we wanted to, you know, start to have our staff be engaged, be educated, and so this is really why we're here, and to then share with you what we're doing in our district, and hopefully you can take away some of the different activities, the different things that we have learned to potentially use within your classrooms. Bill? All right, then the courageous conversations. We usually do this with our staff, and this is just a way for us to make sure that staff understand that we want to make sure that they're staying engaged, and that's morally, emotionally, intellectually, and socially involved in the dialogue, because we need everyone to be able to sit at this table and talk about these sometimes difficult conversations. We ask our staff to experience discomfort. Discomfort is inevitable. It makes a commitment to bring issues into the open through conversations. Even when uncomfortable, change can begin, and sometimes, you know, we don't want to talk about things that make us uncomfortable. However, that's many times the only way change can occur. Speaking your truth, we really encourage our staff to speak their truth and being open about thoughts and feelings, and not just saying what they think others want them to hear. And then finally, expect and accept non-closure, hanging out in uncertainty, don't rush to quick solutions, and many of these topics require kind of an ongoing dialogue. So this isn't something that we know is just going to end here. We understand that there may be some outlying things that you still have questions about, and that's okay. Bill?
So to get into the meat of what we're here to talk about today, implicit bias is the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. It's something that everybody has. We all have our implicit biases, and they have started from 2 or 3 years old, and they just grow as we grow along with our family members, and we're just living life. It's something that just is done unconsciously. We have them. So why is it important for educators to know about implicit biases? Implicit biases can impact relationships with students. They can also create inequitable learning opportunities if we are having these biases, and, you know, the kids are bearing the brunt of these implicit biases, or sometimes they're called microaggressions, and we're not intending to. We, in our group and in the CQ committee, we always talk about impact is greater than intent. We can always say it's not our intention to cause harm, but if the impact is causing harm, then we need to look deeper into ourselves, and sometimes that is the uncomfortable look inside of ourselves, and to look at the lens a little bit differently. And we can get defensive very easily when we start to do that, but I think there's a room for growth if we can, you know, be open to that. So we want to make sure that we're not impacting, you know, this in students in negative ways. Ultimately, implicit biases can impact student learning over time. If, you know, we have a student that has these microaggressions over time, and, you know, it's having this impact, it can affect their they're learning within your classroom, and over time it can carry over for years and years if it gets stacked upon each other. So to become better educators, we need to be willing to acknowledge and reflect on our own biases. So we thought at this time we would kind of share some personal implicit biases, that we've encountered in our lives. I know the one that sticks out to me, and it's happened years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. I was parking at a Park Mall. I'm not sure, it's changed names so many times, but I was in a parking lot and I was getting out and walking into a store there, and I'm walking away and I see a disheveled African American male heading towards me. And as he's passing me, I reach into my pockets and I get my keys and I do the beep beep and lock my car doors. And now that's a microaggression. That's an implicit bias. That's just, I did it it was like within a split second. And that's the kind of things that now looking back at it, definitely need to, check, because, the male walking by obviously walked by me, saw me, and then here's the car horn. And that's something that impacted and probably was harmful to him. So that's one that sticks out. I know the others have one that they would like to share as well.
I can go. I know just in the last few years, I had a family in my classroom who was from another country, and I wasn't sure about their language abilities. And so I was automatically assuming that the parents may need more translations and translators than what they actually needed. I didn't stop to think, let me find out they were actually very bilingual. They did a much better job with multiple languages than I can do. But my assumption was that they would need more help than they did. And so that's definitely something I caught myself in the middle of as well.
Sorry about that. I did have my mic muted. One of the things that I had happen a couple years ago is we invited a student from China to live with us, and he was going to be attending the same high school as my boys and living with us for several years, and then going on to college. And I had the assumption, a bias, that he was a great student coming from China, was ready to go academically, and realized that he had a lot of struggles. And again, realized that that was my bias based upon what I was thinking a student from China would be coming academically with. All right, so moving into our first activity, we had you guys complete a sheet that hopefully you'll have already completed. If not, we'll give you a little bit of time to do that. But this is one of the activities that we actually do with our staff and have done with our staff, and it's called Trading Places. With that, there's the following slides that you're going to see you're going to be provided some descriptions of some various individuals, and just please read through those descriptions, and we want you to determine which individuals you would most likely trade places with. On the ranking form that you will see next, there are columns, and so what we'd like for you to do, and you can go to the next slide, is if you haven't already done this, just on a sheet of paper, put down this ranking form, and just what we'd like for you to do is when you see the first grouping, the first round that we're going to show you in a few minutes, please put those individuals in order as to who you would like to trade places with. So if it's your first choice, you're going to put a 1, and obviously you're going to put an 8 for your last choice. You would rank them in order from 1 through 8. So our first round then, if you could pull that up, is 8 different scenarios of individuals. And so if you would take about a minute and look at those and rank them in the order that you feel you would like to trade places with. All right, we will move on to the next round. So at this time, you're going to get a little bit more information about the individuals you've selected and traded places with. So at this time, if you would review those 8 a little bit of additional information that you've learned about those people to make your decision on if you would keep the same rankings or the same placement, or if you would change any of your decisions on who you would trade places with. All right, now we'll round out round 3. Now you've received just a little bit more information to make your decision on if you would continue to stay where you're at with the trading of places, or if you now have changed your mind and looked at some more information to make a decision on who you would trade places with. Go ahead and rank those in 1 through 8. All right. So let's talk about this. At this time, if you would raise your hand, if you would be, sorry, that's our bell for the high school. At this time, if you would be willing to share a little bit of the responses, what did you notice, or any trends, or did you notice any trends in your responses? If anyone is willing to share.
Don, if you don't mind, I remember doing this. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Just to kind of go back a couple slides for that first one, I remember when I was doing this, and I was looking at the 8 different ones. I was already like gender-wise. I was already implicit biases were already Latin model in my mind was a woman. You know, the 45-year-old Caucasian CEO was a male. So my implicit biases were already picking up within the first round. Why we were going through this, that reminded me. So that was something that stuck out to me. So I just wanted to jump in there because I remember doing this.
Well, and as you speak on that, for me as a woman of African American female, and I identify as multiracial, I looked at having multiple children as a positive because I have 3 boys, and so again, I connected with the woman who had multiple children. So again, did anyone notice any trends in the responses that you selected? And again, if you could raise your hand and we will call on you if anyone's willing to share. All right, Janine.
I noticed as I'm looking back, and I agree too, I had those same thoughts. I was identifying that male, female, attaching that, to different descriptions without the description actually indicating that. So I definitely found myself doing that. And as more was revealed, I did notice that the way I changed my rankings really had to do a lot. The driver to me was, and I'm not sure it would be for anybody or anybody else or everybody, was education. As I saw the education level increasing, I found myself moving that person higher up on my scale. So it wasn't necessarily financial what they were maybe making, but I did notice that education was a driver for me personally. And that made that a more desirable. That could have been, that's, I think, my implicit bias.
Thank you. Kristen?
Hi, if you can hear me, it's interesting that it appears as if what makes a good life, right, to each of us reading it is what we would then use to kind of move people up on our list. So if in my mind what makes a good life is education, or what makes a good life is income or children, as you spoke to, then that would kind of move people up. But before getting to round 2 and 3, it just is so clear, like you think right? You think those aspects that go along with that short description of a person. And oftentimes that's not at all the case. So then they may have something that certainly goes along with what you deem a good life, or not at all. Surprisingly, not at all. So it's certainly eye-opening, just that statement of you think and usually those stereotypes, initially, but they can very quickly become not so helpful.
So was there anything that surprised you then?
Well, one thing you all mentioned gender, and I had made assumptions about gender that were not even correct, right? So I think it was the 45-year-old Caucasian CEO of a 500 company divorced. I had just assumed that was a male until round 3. So what the gender even was surprised me. But then also certainly, right, the things that go against the stereotypes, right? So working at McDonald's, but we know that college students, have jobs like that. But that, appeared to be a surprise. Or the Native American drummer, graduating from Juilliard. So yes, there were many, many surprising things, and I think it was a really effective exercise, and I really enjoyed it.
All right. Anyone else want to weigh in on maybe what information led you to make your decision? Kathy?
I just wanted to say I did agree with what Kristen said. It's how people were spending their time, or maybe how, if what you value was in alignment with how
Kathy, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Unless it's my value or my speaker, I can't understand you. I don't know if you're on a earbuds or something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
Could you or speak into the mic? I don't know, because is anyone else having difficulty? I don't know. I can't hear.
I was having a little difficulty with her as well. Why don't you try to both, Bill and Dawn, mute your mics and see if that helps her.
Thank
I
you.
don't know if I can mute from this screen. I can't find it on here.
is this better?
That's better.
Is that better? Okay.
Yep.
Oh. I love it when I can problem solve IT things. My only comment was that I really agreed with what Kristen said. And for me, it was an assessment of if what I valued and how I spent my time was in alignment with the descriptions. That was the thing that I had a tendency to use most when I was making my decisions.
So hearing that, obviously, there may have been some biases that we all obviously have, and seeing those come out sometimes. So did you notice any specific biases? I know Kristen mentioned males. Did something stand out for you as you were reading these? Kimberly?
Yeah, I think along with what some of the other folks said, the whole assumption right from the beginning, oh, that's a female, that's a male. And I'm so aware of that already. And I talk with my students about that in the psychology classes. But it's just a reminder that even when you know something, it still comes through. And it's something that you've just got to continually remind yourself, don't make that assumption, don't make that assumption. And I'm wondering if you put up yet another round of questions, if we go back and go, oh, well, now there's one more thing to consider. There's just so many layers.
And that's a great point, because it's a never-ending cycle. It's not a check the box and I'm good on implicit biases, because honestly, like I said, from 2 to 3 years old, we've been inundated with, things that we've seen, things that we've heard in the family, and you think you have somebody pegged, and it's not that way. But I agree with what you said. It's not a one and done. You have to be on top of it all the time, because it will sneak right back in.
Yeah, a quote that I like says that the first thought that you think when you see someone or see a situation is what you've been conditioned to think, and the second thought you think after that is how you feel about it. And so it's trying to tap into getting to that second thought, because we all have the first thought.
I think that was the last slide on this one. Don, are you okay to go back to the other slideshow?
I'm frozen.
Nope, we can hear you.
Oh, that's good, because it's showing I'm frozen on my screen, so I can't even see anything except that my screen is frozen. So good. Yeah, actually, I think, it's kind of
That's fine. It can go into my turn anyway.
Yep. I think we can go on to the next activity.
Okay. So I'm going to read to you just so I know how quickly we can get through this. But we have a case study for you to think about. This will give you a chance to kind of consider places you've been in a classroom or with students, or and what you might do in a situation like this, and just get to those questions. A teacher overheard a group of students discussing a professional football player that chose not to stand for the national anthem. They made comments that attributed his team's loss to his choice not to stand during the anthem. In the moment, the teacher decided not to address the issue. Several weeks later, the teacher overheard students talking about a classmate who had chosen not to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance earlier in the day. When asked about their decision to sit, the student explained that they did not believe that liberty and justice for all exists in our country. Classmates expressed disdain for her choice, saying she just wanted attention. It was not because of her beliefs. The teacher wondered if others in the community would view his moderation of this topic in class as conflicting with the school's history of honoring military veterans. His thoughts were interrupted when a student asked him, "Do you think it is disrespectful not to stand during the pledge or the national anthem?" So our first question for you would be, how, if at all, should a teacher's personal opinion about protesting the national anthem or the pledge inform how one responds to the student's question at the end of class? Because we all know personal opinions do come up, especially with young adults.
All right, I'm going to speak on this one too. Is that all right?
Yes,
Absolutely.
Because this is literally going through I teach first grade, so I have 6 and 7 year olds, and in our school building, we start off with our daily announcements, and at the end of the daily announcements, our secretary says, "Now stand for a Pledge of Allegiance," and this has been going through my head. Now I don't have a answer one way or the other, but it is something that I've been thinking about. Where I lie on this, and I would love to have conversations with others about this, but I do struggle with this. Like, can a 6 and 7 year old pledge allegiance to the flag, and what does that mean? Especially, I want to honor like the families that have. I mean, I have a daughter, or I have a little girl who has a father overseas right now and is an active military member. But I also know that I could have a family that are struggling and don't think that there's justice for all in our country as well. And I want to honor both of those. So I struggle with that. That's really not an answer, sorry.
No, I think it's part of the discussion. Well, I will just say that as a first grade teacher, like Bill, I struggle as well, because I also wonder if just in policy of having all students stand for the pledge in the morning, if we automatically, even for students who I may have who are Jehovah's Witness, we automatically imply something about their choice not to stand by making that our morning choice. I'm going to go on to question 2 since we haven't had any hands up yet. But we can always go back if somebody has a thought they want to share. How could you address social or political issues mentioned during casual conversations by students? Should teachers address these issues even when doing so cuts into instructional time for the planned lesson? I know this is an area that makes a lot of teachers uncomfortable. Janine?
I feel the uncomfortableness in this area. Having college students is certainly a lot different than having first graders. Personally, I keep my political and social opinions out of the classroom best I can. Again, I have to really examine to be sure that implicitly I am not including them. But what I try to do is bring it back to the students and say, let's talk about leadership. Define the qualities of a leader, and then look at your choice, and do they fit these qualities, and are these good qualities, or are these qualities that are necessary? But it is a super uncomfortable, and of course with college students you get a lot more opinions in these areas, and sometimes they can be heated, not heated, strong. They have strong emotional ties. So this is definitely an area that gives me a challenge.
Thank you. Kathy?
My answer to number 1 would be no, not at all. I certainly agree with what Janine said, is that doing everything that you can to keep your own opinions out. I work with health students and have spent a lot of time over the last 30 years talking to them about ethics in health. And I have found that my perception is that students find it most valuable when you just facilitate a conversation, learning to ask questions, and having them, have a discussion amongst themselves. A lot of times you do have to protect maybe one student from another, those that come across as being maybe more aggressive rather than assertive. But I think facilitating conversations and asking challenging questions is important.
Thank you. Kristen?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, looks like my volume is low. So I spend some time doing committee work with like behavioral issues in the classroom with college students, and this has come up in some of our committee discussions about the classroom being an open place for students to express their opinions. And with some social issues going on today, we've recently talked about, some speakers on campus. So, for example, talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and how, making the classroom a place where people can freely share those opinions. But then it's recently come up that if that is the take, then you run the risk of students having the complete opposite opinion and also wanting to share that in the classroom with the student who shares, the extreme opposite view. And sometimes that can get heated. So but I thought it was an interesting discussion that we had, that everybody's opinions, it's a safe place for everybody to share their opinions, but especially in this area, it can get really heated sometimes, and lead to disruptions in the classroom, especially with college students. So I think when you open up that discussion, it's one thing listening to a student, and then you have to be prepared for another student to stand up and say, well, I think all lives matter. And I have a problem with you saying, Black Lives Matter. So it's tricky in opening it up to a safe place for all opinions, that you're going to get opinions on both sides of the issue, especially when this came because we were, like I said, considering having a speaker come to campus. So what do you do when that speaker is talking about a social issue that some students have a problem with? Do you encourage attendance at the event for all students? Do you give extra credit for the students who attend, when maybe they don't support that, topic or that view or that opinion? So those were all interesting discussions that came up. And again, I don't have an answer, unfortunately, but certainly something to think about.
I just love hearing. I love hearing because obviously we're on different ends of the spectrum. Hearing from the college end to what I'm dealing with in first grade, there are some similarities there because you do want everybody's opinion to be valid. On a smaller scale in our class, I know I've read stories where maybe the title is called "Pink is for Boys" or it's Teddy's favorite toy, and the boy has a doll that's his favorite toy, and you have like the giggles and the stuff like that. And I've worked on even things like having a conversation. Well, why are you giggling? And and talking them through it. And it's got to be that safe space like you were talking about. I just like hearing the different ends of the spectrum. So.
I would also say to Kristen that even though like I teach first grade, but being on the CQ committee in our district, this same issue comes up because we're pre-K to 12, and certainly our junior high school students may not be able to articulate themselves always as well as a college student, but they are coming from both diverse sides of the spectrum when we talk about very contentious issues in society. So certainly these are great concerns that you've brought up. I think we're running out of time for the case study.
Can I add one more thing, being that I'm
Yes,
at the
please.
Okay, so just hearing what you said, again, if you're offering those opportunities where if it's somewhat controversial, also having the opportunities that are kind of balanced so that if one is on one spectrum, but then, I know universities offer a lot of different opportunities that where people come on campus or they have different guest speakers or there's different things in the community. So just encouraging that on both ends. And then, hearing that from the high school perspective, when students are on different areas of interest or different political views or what have you, that's where we go back. And this is kind of what we use with our staff, what we talked about, the courageous conversations and making sure that people understand, let's not direct it directly to that person of how I don't like what you are doing, but more so about just having a dialogue about what you feel strongly about, and not really attacking the other person who may think differently, because we want to make sure that people feel safe, like you said, to speak their truth and what they believe in and how they feel. So then
That's great feedback. And yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was going to move on to the next thing, but no, go ahead and speak on that, please.
No, absolutely. I appreciate that, and having an opportunity for that alternative perspective without viewing the holder of that perspective, again, with the implicit biases that you are a racist, or you are, all of these other opinions that come along with that. And students are likely to go attend events that they already feel passionate about. And I almost wish that, students would be required to attend an event that is in opposition to their view, maybe, so that they can, have an open mind. But students are obviously more likely to attend an event if they already hold that belief, right? To already just kind of confirm what they already think. So thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, and I just will say one more thing. As a school counselor, we had to take a cultural counseling class. And so we actually did have to, in my master's program, attend things that maybe were out of our comfort level or that we weren't as familiar with. And so I think it's okay as a faculty person to encourage that and having them step outside of their comfort level. However, just making sure that, it's kind of across the board, so that way everyone, because I know with my master's program, it was a requirement. So, but again, it was part of that class. So moving on to some strategies that we would recommend to get to know you activities for students. And just to give an example of something that is here at the high school, one of our social studies teachers has a map in their classroom. And so students, when he initially is starting the year, he has them share where they're from, because not everyone, even though they live in Perrysburg, they're from all over. And so it allows those students to see that, wow, there's someone maybe similar, or maybe they're from the same area, or they grew up and now have moved to Perrysburg. So that's just one activity. And I know that, I don't know if Bill or Nikki want to jump in, but there are ways to kind of help those student activities to kind of engage your students early on, so they get to know you and feel a little bit more comfortable within your classroom.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, is that even though sometimes discussing these things can be really contentious, making sure that students who are in a marginalized group or who are victims of different things know that you, as their teacher, will support their views or see that through.
The next one is mindfulness. Again, sorry for the bell there. Mindfulness meditation. This provides a space for us to discover and more about ourselves and how to relate with others. There's somewhat of a triangle where it's thoughts, emotions, and body sensations. And what that means is, like, you could intentionally set for the week kind of a notice, when you notice someone who appears different from you in some way, notice what that looks like. So what are the thoughts? Notice your thoughts. An assumption, a stereotype, an expectation, what judgments are coming up, in what ways is this conditioned mind othering this person. You may notice emotions that you experience. Let yourself fully feel and explore those emotions with moment-to-moment awareness and compassion. Or you may notice body sensations, visceral gut feeling, a tension in the muscles, like what Bill mentioned when he had that moment where he was going to his car and he saw someone African American, he beeped, that was something where he tensed up. Facial expression, a shift in your posture. So this noticing is the first step of challenging bias. And so just really being aware of yourself. And so sometimes even through just the mindfulness apps that are available, just really becoming aware of how you're reacting in certain situations. Also, we've kind of focused in on curriculum, as Bill had mentioned, and I believe Nikki also mentioned that, you know, we are evaluating our curriculum and making sure that the books that are being read in the classroom are, you know, showing students and they are seeing themselves within those books, that, you know, the teachers are utilizing, and then making sure that, you know, we're, you know, I'm sorry, making sure that, you know, the materials that you're using are, you know, because a lot of times you guys as faculty will use supplemental information, and so maybe making sure some of that information, you know, is kind of across the board for all, you know, kind of organically in your within your curriculum, and you're using that to help, you know, supplement what you're doing. And then also celebrating or acknowledging holidays that promote inclusivity within your classroom, such as the Martin Luther King Day, Autism Awareness Month. So that might be something you want to do so that students see you outside of just what you are teaching. They're seeing you as someone who is interested in other things, you know, beyond what you're teaching within your classroom. And then maybe adapting a class activity for students with a disability to make sure that they feel in all aspects of class. I don't know, Bill, if there's anything else you wanted to add to that, or
the only one that kind of stuck out to me, and you kind of hit on it, was the curriculum should promote and bring awareness towards people of all backgrounds. And in my class, you know, I read a lot of picture books, and we live in Perrysburg, which is a heavily, you know, white community, and it's important for, you know, my white students to see stories of, you know, in my class, I talk about what books can be windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. I want them to be able to see inside of a book and see people that are different than them. And we talk about the different cultures, you know, and the different, you know, the Black culture and the Indian culture. And we want to talk about that and bring it up because they don't see it sometimes in their community or in their hood. So I want them to be aware of that. So that's the only thing I wanted to kind of jump in on.
all right.
All right. Anything that you all would like to ask us or each other or talk to us about?
It's Kimberly. Could I just say that I think one of the things that you all talked about, and I totally, it just comes back and back as a reminder, is that to set an example for the students, no matter whether they're younger students who don't have a whole bunch of hypothetical thinking abilities yet and things are more concrete, or they're students who are able, or maybe just moving into that stage, to offer those reflective questions and to just say to them, you know, I struggle with these things too, and you know, sometimes I look at a situation from this perspective, and sometimes I look at it from this perspective, and it kind of goes back to your first slide where you said, be aware that sometimes things don't have final answers. It's just the process where you put those thoughts out there, and they can say, well, maybe I can look at things from a couple different perspectives, and maybe there's not necessarily right answer, but what's important is that I'm open for the reflection.
And that's a great point, Kimberly. I would also add that with the strategies that we suggested, one of the things, if you notice, is that there's a relationship. And so building those relationships with your students, I think, is important. And as you can see, you know, that's going to help with regards to students feeling more comfortable and feeling more open to express themselves and to engage with you as a faculty.
Absolutely. That the trust is, I think, the bottom of any relationship, to build that trust and that the feeling like I can be safe. Great activities. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for being a part of this. Are there any other questions, or we do have another slide that we want to share because we have been doing a lot of work with just books and reading books and some of the information that we kind of gathered when doing this presentation. So we encourage you to look at some of the books. We actually, as a whole CQ community, read White Fragility and, you know, did that as a staff. And so, but we've continued that work to just really kind of dive deep into some of the things that we're trying to do within our district. Yes, Janine.
Hi, Dawn. Would you be able to share a couple of the slides with us? Especially, I love the exercise that we did, ranking the person you want to trade places with. That's even, in my opinion, can be used as sort of that icebreaker on the first day of school. Just in class, sometimes you were just looking for something, other than stand up and introduce the person next to you. I mean, those are fine, but something that is also meaningful like that might be a great opportunity that first day when we're looking for something new and innovative to do.
Absolutely. I will say this, if you notice how we put the presentation together, we always start out with talking about ourselves and our own things that we may have discomfort with or that we are working towards. So that way, then it opens up that dialogue for others to feel more comfortable, because they say, then a person can say, wow, I'm not the only one feeling this way. So that's what we would encourage if you do the trading places, is that you maybe have something prior to that, before that activity.
Right.
Okay.
And also sometimes those activities are really good to do maybe mid-semester. Sometimes students who are feeling marginalized may feel on the spot with an activity like that first thing before they know their class at all. So sometimes it helps to do a little bit of relationship building before you jump into something real meaty.
Mm-hmm. I have a lot of students that I have over and over again as well. So maybe not in certain classes, but sometimes I have classes where I have a semester where I have the same students 3 times for 3 different classes, or I've had them in the past. Once they're getting in the higher level class, I can see how that might be a better place to do something like that.
Well, the other piece is the Kirwan Institute, which is out of Ohio State, is a phenomenal program that OSU has implemented, and many of the school districts down in the Columbus area utilize them. We actually may be doing some type of training with the Kirwan Institute. So again, if you're interested in this work, we definitely encourage, some of the resources that we have listed here.
I think I thought there was one more slide. And I mean, we kind of already talked about it, a commit to action. What do you plan to take from this session and utilize in your own personal and professional life? It's just something to think about and take with you as you head out. But other than that, I think that was the last one.
Yes. So we thank you. Nikki had to get back to class. I know Bill is going to
I'm going to have to go back too.
So if there's,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you for coming to our session, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nicole, Dawn, Bill. We really appreciate this. I think we all know, be mindful, challenge ourselves. That uncomfortable feeling is good. It opens opportunities for us, and we really appreciate all the work that you're doing and sharing. For our participants who are still there, note that I put a link to our session evaluation form. If you wouldn't mind taking that, it'll take you about a minute to get there and answer the questions on the evaluation form. We'd appreciate it. I wish everybody a wonderful start of the year. It's not what we ever expected we'd be, but we certainly appreciate everybody's hard work.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You guys have an awesome day.
Thanks. You too, Dawn.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. If anybody wants to know how you can either just leave, or you can go to the left menu tab, drop down, and select the very last option is to sign out of the session.